Hi, I'm Alicia Armstrong, and this is my dog Harper Lee, and we are domestic violence survivors. So before I was involved in my abusive relationship, I was a Master of Social Work student at Florida State University, where ironically enough, I chose to study and research interpersonal violence and sexual violence. That was always my area of focus ever since I had gotten into college. I had developed a great cohort of friends and was very socially active with my friends. I also was a middle level manager at an office with the state of Florida. That I had been at for about 7 years. So I worked my way through college up to a middle management position and had a really good life. Had a great roommate that had been my college roommate, and we were just starting to kind of enter or work our way up in the workforce, and really a social support network that was more than what I could have imagined growing up. Things did change more than I could have ever envisioned. Getting into a relationship would change my life. Not so much with career and with education, but definitely with my social support, including the roommate that I mentioned and my good group of friends that I had. Firstly, he offered me attention that I had never felt before from a significant other or somebody interested in me. And what looked like a great amount of attention at first was actually always excessive in the excessive texting and calling and kind of the constant communication. If we weren't together, he would want to be in communication the best way that we could be. And so that was attractive at first, until in hindsight, of course, I realized that it was a huge red flag and actually something that came between me and my friendships. Much like me, and something that we kind of bonded over, we both came from an impoverished childhood. The difference between what I did with my life and what he chose to do involved, really being career motivated, working my way up the career ladder with a really good, stable state job at the time. And I tried to be independent and take care of myself, whereas he did not do that. He relied on me for the support. I think in the 13-month relationship that we had together, he maybe worked for 2 weeks out of that time. So I was really financially providing for him, and that made it a little bit more challenging to leave, because then I felt responsible for him as well. We had a very short courting phase. He showered me with attention very early on, and it really wasn't that he had to win me over. I was already won over by the attention, really without even getting to know who he was or is as a person. And I remember on our second date, immediately a red flag now, not so much a red flag then, when he told me that he loved me. Nobody had ever told me that outside of family before. And I was overcome with emotion. I didn't realize that it was a red flag to say that. Our second date, 2 weeks after we even started talking, less than a week after we met in person, he told me that he loved me. And I didn't know what else to do, so I said it back. So it was a very short courting phase. One thing that he did mention that I now see as another red flag is that he told me a very disturbing story of when he had a puppy just 6 months or a year before. He had brought home a puppy in addition to the family dog that his parents had. And he said, they just didn't get along. This puppy was just too much. Our family dog just didn't like the puppy. And so, of course, I'm curious. So what did you do? And the decision-making and behavior that he chose in a scenario like that was so extreme, so warped, and such a indicator of somebody who is capable of domestic violence, sexual assault, and other crimes. What he told me was that he took the puppy to a field out that was behind his family home, and he shot the puppy. That was his way of solving the problem. I did not see it as a red flag. Did I think it was disturbing? Yes. Was I expecting to hear that when I said, so what'd you do? Absolutely not. But did I let that stop me from pursuing a relationship any further with him? I didn't. The first time that I really thought that there was something wrong was a couple of months after starting a relationship with him. We had traveled out of town to go to a wedding of one of my friends from elementary school. And he seemed all for getting out of town, was very excited to go with me until we got out of Tallahassee and were on the interstate driving over to where the wedding was. He became increasingly confrontational, picking fights for seemingly no reason or something that maybe the average person would not think is a big deal. For instance, like the snack that you want for a road trip being the gas station that we stop at doesn't have that, or the convenience store we stop at doesn't have that. And so that was problematic. That was an issue. And then there was just huge drama that happened that he didn't really want to go to the wedding. And so we were kind of fighting before that. Are you going to stay at the hotel? Or are you going to come with me? And what quickly became a pattern in our relationship I saw on that trip was the financial exploitation of, if there is conflict, it can usually be solved by getting him something that he wants. In the case of the wedding, it was he didn't like what he was wearing to the wedding. So we had to go clothes shopping before that. And as I mentioned before, I was the main financial contributor in the relationship. So that quickly became a way that I learned that would keep him calm. And that was the first time that I started thinking, this isn't normal, this isn't healthy, this is toxic. But I had no idea what it would evolve into. So other things that I purchased for him were more simple things like food, drinks, alcohol, kind of basic living supplies. And then some other entertainment things like video games, video game systems, things like that, all the way to what I became, or he entered the relationship with a drug problem. I don't know if it was a problem prior to the relationship. I am thinking that it was, but that's just me speculating. But part of the financial support that I provided was money for him to buy drugs. I knew that it wasn't a great situation. There were some thoughts that this was kind of my lot in life, and as a way to kind of cope and accept that this is the situation that I had chosen to be in. And those were more strategic survival thoughts for me in that moment of being in the relationship. I think deep down, there was that nagging feeling that I didn't deserve any better, and this is what I was used to. Coming from a family where domestic violence was very prevalent, as long as I could remember, until I moved out, it seemed very familiar to me. So I think it took, even though I realized early on that maybe there were some extreme responses to things, it took me a while to really understand that there is better. I do deserve better. I deserve to be in a healthy, loving, non-toxic relationship. I think for me, the things that were said or done in the relationship was more the dynamic that was created, in a dynamic that felt so familiar to what I was used to growing up. Oftentimes, you'll hear in stories of interpersonal violence that the tipping point is someone external or a factor external to the survivor. In my case, the tipping point was Harper Lee. We had an all-night fight one evening in December of the year that I left. And he often used Harper as a way to control the situation and would sometimes withhold her from me after a fight when all she wanted to do was be with her mom. And that was often a way that he would take her from me. And in the middle of just the worst fight that we had, he took her. Her kennel was in our living room at the time, and he took her and he threw her into the kennel. And all I remember seeing was this little innocent 6-month-old puppy clawing at the bottom of the kennel, trying to get out, whining for me, looking at me. And she was so helpless. And as he dragged the kennel from the living room into our spare bedroom, I just remember thinking, this is it. I have to get her out of here. I have to get me out of here. I remember that my phone screen was smashed in, lots of damage in the house as far as things being shattered against the wall. Definitely physical violence. I had a very big black eye and bruises all over me. And there was sexual violence. Like there had been many times before, anytime that I tried to leave the situation or ask that he leave the home and that we break up, there was always I think one of the worst things that he thought he could do, in his mind, the best way to exert control over me was sexual violence. So there was definitely at least one incidence of rape that happened during that long fight that night. For me, what was essential to me leaving was very much having a plan. There are lots of resources that people who might be in this same situation can look at as far as what would a plan look like? What is escaping a situation like this look like? For some people, that involves keeping a go bag already packed and like hidden somewhere, or in the trunk of your car, or at a friend's house with important documents. For other people, they don't necessarily know the exact day that they're going to leave, but when the opportunity presents itself, they realize that it's go time. And that's what happened to me. But I had to be very, for financial reasons, very selective as far as when that date would come. And I knew it would have to be sometime in the month of December if I was going to leave, because that's when my lease was up. And it would naturally evict him from the apartment, which I wasn't able to do without a lengthy court process. This is huge. Harper and I, in our healing process, and I say our because she is just as much of a survivor of abuse as I am. But having her here is huge, that she's able to hopefully spread awareness between the connection between animal abuse, which we saw in my story with him killing the puppy before he even knew me, before Harper was even a question. But it's huge for me to be able to advocate and have her advocate for her fellow furry and non-furry friends that might be in this same situation and spread awareness on that. And it's very comforting. I'm very, very fortunate. She's going to be 12 next month. And so she's been a survivor for 11 and a half years. And for her to still be here very well taken care of is huge, but also the emotional component of having a pet for survivors is very helpful. And she gives me the courage to be able to share my story and her story. I've gotten licensed as a clinical social worker, and I specialize in survivors of interpersonal and sexual violence. I try to give back every day and help other souls find their healing. What I envision to be next is a goal that I've had actually for the past 5 or 6 years. I have wanted to create a nonprofit organization called Harper's Heroes that will help survivors who are trying to get back on their feet and really helping empower survivors to have one less barrier to leaving.